Hello, Larry Burns here for another episode of Discovering the Power of You. And I also want to wish everyone happy holidays as we get ready to bring in a new year. And thanks for joining us. And most importantly, I want to introduce my guest today, Scott Burrows. Scott is an international motivational speaker who has a wonderful story of resilience and grit. And there's a message for all of us when Scott speaks. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Scott Burrows. Scott, welcome to Discovering the Power of You.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. I know how busy you are traveling around speaking, and now that the pandemic is over, you're actually able to go in person. And so I know that keeps you very, very busy. So
Yes,
thank
sir.
you for doing this. And so you and I met through my producer here, Rick Miller, and your friend, my friend as well. You and I had lunch in downtown Stewart and talked about your journey, and you're so gracious to do this. And so I thought we'd start by asking you to talk about your journey to not only where you are today, but how you have achieved so much over the last many, many years.
Okay, great. It's a great question, and I'll try to keep this tight, if you will. But I think long story short is I grew up in Chicago by the age of 8. Dad moved down to Stewart, Florida, north of West Palm Beach. Got tired of the cold weather, and but I was an athlete growing up through school. I was in kickboxing and golf and track and football, and I played college football for Bobby Bowden as a walk-on wide receiver back in 1983, which was an amazing experience. I had my last kickboxing fight broadcast on ESPN at the West Palm Beach Auditorium, and so I was an athlete growing up, and I had a really bright future ahead of me, I believed. Whether it was athletics or I was attending Florida State, I was a bachelor. Well, I got my degree in finance, but I was at a finance degree, so I thought I might carve out a career in the banking industry or so forth. But my life changed. I changed in mere seconds on November 3rd, 1984. And today, as we're filming, today is November 3rd, 2023. So today I'm celebrating my 39th anniversary of my automobile accident. And so what happened was on November 3rd, which is a Friday night, I was riding passenger in a friend's car around 10 o'clock p.m. And it was a dark road, no oncoming traffic. And he lost control of the wheel, ran out the road, hit a mound of sand, sending his car hurtling into the air before tumbling back to earth end over end. And it was in that one moment that my young life, as I knew it, would literally change forever. I'd say one of the first times that I came to, I was introduced to my doctor, Stringer, my neurosurgeon, and he said, "Look, I know you've been complaining. You can't move your arms or your legs, and you feel numb from your shoulders all the way down to your toes." He goes, "The reason that is literally 2 weeks ago, you were involved in a horrific accident, broke your neck, and a very serious spinal cord injury that has left you paralyzed from your chest down and diagnosed a quadriplegic." My life changed at 19. And it was a heck of a road. Not only was being paralyzed a difficult task within itself, I went through, had a number of spinal cord injury complications that should have actually taken out my life. I had 4 blood clots lodged in my right lung, otherwise known as a deadly pulmonary embolism. I lost 45 pounds. I had pneumonia, collapsed lung, 103-degree fever. But somehow I just kept the faith. I kept praying to God quite a bit, and I forged my way through it. And interesting enough, 6 months later, I literally turned an impossible dream into a reality. And I was able to walk out of Craig Hospital in Denver, Colorado with a pair of forearm crutches and braces on my legs. And then it would take me another 6 years of my life, another 2,190 days to be able to walk with the simple use of a cane. And that, from that point forward, was kind of where my life, how it changed and where it evolved.
Thank you for sharing that story. And so I'd love to ask you about how you took this accident, this change in your life at such a young age,
Right.
and how you've turned it into something that has inspired and helped thousands of people. How did you determine that your life was going to be dedicated professionally? I know you're dedicated to your family,
Sure.
but your professional life dedicated to talking about the things that you experienced.
Yeah.
You're very open, and I admire that, about your difficulties, your challenges. When did you determine that that's what you were going to do?
Okay. So I think the best way to share that is this, is that after the injury, after I came home, my dad was adamant, and he said, you are going to go back to college and you're going to get your degree. So I went back to school, got my degree in finance. And that's when a buddy of mine said during graduation, he said, if you really want to turn lemons into lemonade, why don't you consider becoming a financial advisor in the insurance and financial industry? And one thing you can do is specialize in disability income insurance planning for professionals, as well as small businesses and large corporations. And that's when I joined Northwestern Mutual Life. And when I hit the ground running, I learned through Northwestern Mutual, they encouraged us to learn and master storytelling because they believed it was critical to the selling process. And so that's what I did. I tried to become the best storyteller that I could to promote life and disability insurance planning, as well as financial investments and so forth. But we went to a conference about 4 years into the business, and there's 4,000 of us in Milwaukee listening to our opening keynote speaker. His name, Charlie Plumb. Now, Charlie Plumb was a Navy pilot shot down behind enemy lines, prisoner of war for 6 years in the same camp as the late Senator John McCain. And Charlie spoke on the platform for 45 minutes as an overcoming inspirational speaker, talking to a bunch of sales reps. And he just wowed the audience. And I remember being there and going, man, I could see myself doing that for the rest of my life. And but that's when the seed was basically, it was planted. What was interesting is that in my 5th year, I qualified for an industry award. They call it the $1 Million Roundtable. It's a 100% commission-driven award that less than 8% of my peers achieve on an annual basis from around the world. Right after that mountaintop experience, riding this high, I was involved in a second automobile accident. An 80-year-old man ran a stop sign over lunch while I was going to see a client of mine, and I didn't see it, and our cars collided. He was not hurt. I was, and I was buckled in. But new injuries forced me out of the business for, I'd say, 4 or 5 months. But during that time, 2 things happened. One, my brother called, and he basically said, I need your help. I've articulated a new vision for your professional future. He wanted me to help him expand his golf course fertilizer business into Southeast Asia. And why there is because he had a client out of Chicago, just took the golf course superintendent's job at Laguna National Country Club in Singapore. And he had a significantly large budget to purchase fertilizers, but he wanted something different. Custom blended fertilizers designed specifically to meet the needs of his golf course. And something the suppliers on that side of the world had no interest in pursuing whatsoever. So in doing so, I did my due diligence during the second accident. In the meantime, my brother had a conversation with the only golf course fertilizer manufacturer in the world, which happens to be located in Lakeland, Florida, who took a bold risk to find a way to design and manufacture custom blends. And when they learned about our unique opportunity on the other side of the world, they were thrilled. So I made a decision after my second accident to leave an industry I had so much passion for, to pursue a new career with my brother, to build that business from the bottom up. And we did so. We went to market. We built a multi-million-dollar business for over 20 years. But during that time building that business, I could not help think about Charlie Plumb and the impact he had on me. So during that time, I basically said, I want to start speaking as well. I want to share my story like Charlie Plumb, because I know the gratification that he experienced of giving back to humanity at such a high level. And that really became my destiny. So after we sold the business, the international business, I morphed into speaking. And for the last 20 years, it has taken me all over the world. And I talk about my 3 principles that I live by each and every day: vision, mindset, grit. And I use my own life-changing story, like Charlie Plum used his life-changing story on the platform, while bringing those concepts to life in hopes to inspire, to help people overcome their own challenges, personally and professionally, how to navigate change, and so forth. So that's been my journey in a summary over the last a bunch of years with 3 different businesses.
Yeah.
So forth. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, your dad was also in that fertilizer business, correct?
He was. What he was is he introduced us to the opportunity in Southeast Asia. Dad was a golf course superintendent at Hugh Hefner's Playboy Club when I was 8 years old. So I learned how to play golf, and then he got tired of the cold weather, and one December, and uprooted the family to Stuart, Florida, where he became a superintendent for many years at Turtle Creek Country Club in Jupiter, Florida, which is just down the street. Right. And then my dad went into agronomy to become a soil doctor after that. And he went into the consulting arena, and he was traveling over the world. So he opened the door for me and my brother, if you will, to take advantage of an opportunity of a lifetime.
That's great. Well, that's what dads are for, right?
You betcha.
And when we were having lunch, we couldn't remember the golf course in Akron that you or your brother were involved in. And then afterwards, you told me it was Sharon, which is a wonderful golf course, a wonderful club. And it's still all male, so it's a little controversial in today's world, but it is it's a gem in the Akron area. So and I lived there for a couple of years and became very familiar with it. So
I played that golf course once back in the day with Dad and Frank Doby, who was the golf course superintendent there for decades. Before he retired, now he lives in Naples, living the good life.
So you mentioned the vision, mindset, and grit principles. Do you mind taking a few minutes to give us a snapshot of what that message is that you deliver so well?
So in order so when I was first paralyzed, there's no handbook to say, hey, this is how you're going to, get yourself out of this. And, besides being resilient and working hard and so forth. But I really gravitated to my past in terms of what I learned from my coaches, teachers, anybody who had an influence on my life. And I realized early on that vision, mindset, grit are the 3 principles that I basically was taught in my earlier life. And I've been using it throughout my adult life. I'm 59 today. But I talk about vision and the importance of vision, and I learned it from my days as an athlete. It is free, powerful, and the beginning point to your next destination, and regardless of your win-loss record. And so, when I think about vision, when I talk to audiences about vision, is that you need to know what you're fighting for. And you want to imprint that outcome over and over. You want to do it so frequently that your mind can no longer tell the difference between what you're fighting for and what is real. And in doing so, it becomes your belief, which now becomes your reality. And the backdrop behind that, if you will, when you can see something in your mind's eye in terms of what you want to accomplish and you imprint it over and over, you're letting your subconscious mind digest that, interpret it, feel it, and experience it at such a level that when your subconscious mind, which never sleeps, it's awake 24/7, it's basically designed to do whatever it is that you tell it within its capacity, right? And so that's been a big thing for me. I mean, I'll never forget seeing Charlie Plum. After seeing him speak, even though I didn't pull the trigger until 9 years later to become a speaker, I saw myself on that stage that Charlie Plum was speaking on, speaking to thousands of people. It was sitting here for the longest of times. And so I try to talk about reasons why you need to create a compelling vision when it entices you to take action. That's the first and foremost. And when your listeners are out there, whatever you want to achieve, whether you're trying to get in shape, slim down a little bit, eat better, you want to travel, you want to do whatever, it begins with the message that you sell yourself in terms of what you're fighting for. You want to live it right here between your 2 ears, so to speak. And so I think there's something to be said about that. And so that's one thing I talk about. Secondly, I talk about mindset, but there's a lot of different mindsets that I really talk about. One mindset is focusing on those things which you can control, like your ability to adapt to situations as circumstances change. Another mindset is that anything is possible. It's believing that anything is possible, that your mind can accomplish anything. And I talk a lot about grit, which is your willingness to discipline yourself to persevere, to be resilient in the pursuit of your goals when you're knee deep in the trenches. You know, whether you're at work, you're putting out fires as you're fighting for every victory, every achievement, and so forth. And especially nothing positive is showing up. And all it's beckons you to give in, quit, or maintain the status quo. And so those are the three things that I really talk about. And I try to bring those to life in my book, which is also titled Vision, Mindset, Grit, but in my keynote presentations as well.
Excellent. And I want to talk a little bit about your book as well.
Yeah.
But give our listeners and our viewers sort of an idea of the types of organizations you're speaking to. And then I want to sort of follow up with what do you see that resonates so well to those corporate people in today's world after going through, 3 years of a pandemic and weirdness. Yeah. And I'd love to hear that.
Okay. So I've been speaking now for about 20 years. I've presented to 25, 30 plus Fortune 500 companies, associations, both state and national. I've been speaking around the world multiple times. So a lot of organizations who bring me in, they're looking for like an inspirational, overcoming speaker that can set the tone of the conference, someone's got some really good content where their attendees can learn, take away, put into action. In those keynotes, because I had to navigate change and I did it quite well, but with audience these days, I mean, coming during the pandemic, even coming out of the pandemic, I mean, everything is changing today and it's changing fast. A lot of times their industry is changing, their competition's changing, chances are their organizations is changing. They've got new technologies and products coming to market. But when I talk to them about change is this, I say, look, if you resist it, if you resist looking or seeing change as a breakthrough opportunity, an opportunity to plan, reinvent, and change up your priorities in either your personal or professional lives, catching up can be a long, difficult, and frustrating process. That's assuming you survive and have a positive outcome. And the reason I think I'm an expert in terms of delivering these types of messages with corporations is because of the fact that I've lived it. And then during a keynote presentation, I think it's important to know is that I was paralyzed, my chest down, diagnosed a quadriplegic, and told that I'd be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So in a 1-hour keynote, I relived that experience in a wheelchair. And most of the attendees have no idea of really who I am or my story. They're there for the first time listening to it. Halfway through it, I do get out of that wheelchair. And it's a big aha moment, but it's not for me. It's basically for them. But it's about what can happen if you apply the principles of vision, mindset, and grit. If you're willing to adapt to situations, embrace change, adversity, ask better questions. One thing I talk about is, a lot of times when we experience change, when you're picking at the pieces of a failed project, if you will, you may ask why in the world is this happening, to me? And I asked the same question when I was first paralyzed. But what I realized is that when you ask the why questions during the tough times, it doesn't offer you a solution. If anything, it'll leave you feeling more frustrated and discouraged. And then what I learned through the study of martial arts, that the questions we need to be asking ourselves during the tough times are the what questions, as in what can I learn and what can I gain by embracing adversity. And the reason that is that the what questions are open-ended. They get you thinking, and they can tap into the right side of your brain, the creative side. And when you're being creative, it can help you discover innovative solutions to problem solving. And it can help you find the positives in any experience, the win, as opposed to dwelling on the obvious, overwhelming negatives. So that's part of the vision, mindset, grit piece that I bring into it. But being in a wheelchair for the first 30 minutes in a keynote presentation, at that point, I get out of it and I stand up using a golf club as my cane. And I not only just stand, and that's turning an impossible dream into reality, I'm able to take steps and walk. So basically, the audience is seeing transformational change right there live on stage. And then from that point, I continue to build on the concepts of vision, mindset, grit. We go into the business piece of it, and I cap it off snow skiing from 12,000 feet above sea level, way up in the Rocky Mountains. And I learned literally 7 years after the accident, when a really dear friend of mine who since passed away, his name is Brad Blessman, and he was a blessing to me in my life. But he took me to the top of a Vale, and at the end of 6 days, I was skiing down a very difficult run. They call it China Bowl. It's steep, it's treacherous, but we conquered it. It wasn't a graceful ski, but the whole purpose is Brad Blessman wanted me to know how far I have come since becoming diagnosed with quadriplegic. And when you look back at the back bowl, if you look at China Bowl, which is the back bowl of Vale, it is massive. When you're in the very bottom, you're looking up at 12,000 feet. It's insane, but it did wonders for me. I found a whole new passion in my life because it brought back the sensation of running. But for the audience, I believe it gets them believing that they can conquer anything that's standing in front of them today. Any challenge, they know to navigate through it, cope with change, to hitting higher levels of achievement, personal performance, peak performance, professionally as well.
Very powerful. I have not had the privilege of seeing your presentation in person, but I've seen it several times on video. And when you get up and walk, it is stunning. It's breathtaking, in my opinion. And by the reaction of the audiences, they feel even more so because they're there, not expecting it.
No, they're not. And it's a really pivotal point in the presentation, because you have to understand is that for me to be on stage, I got to be very, very vulnerable, and I got to expose myself, and I just kind of go there. So I relive the experience that happened today, 39 years ago. I do it a lot. And I believe if I can share my message in the most authentic way, in terms of someone hearing it for the very first time, if I can convey that message, and I'm an emotional storyteller, when you can connect through storytelling and get emotional, it's amazing the response another human being can have once listening to a story like that. Not just me, but anybody else. But when I do get out of it, the room erupts. It's usually a huge standing ovation. Which is great. I'm not there looking for that, but it's how they feel on the inside.
Yeah,
these people feel amazing. And one of the few words that I'll say right after that, when they sit back down, one thing I'll say from time to time is that my first karate instructor, Royal West, once said the reason so many people cannot achieve the impossible in their lives, personally as well as professionally, is they view the impossible as nothing more than an excuse to discipline themselves, to take some sort of action. Then I'll look at the audience and I'll say, how many of you are now ready to get out of your own chair, so to speak, and just stand up to the challenges you're experiencing in your life and take action in ways you've never thought about taking action.
Yeah, deal with it.
That's just a way to really drive home the messaging that I'm sharing, giving them the tools and the belief that they can do much more if they choose to do or want to do much more in their life on a professional level as well.
Indeed. So one of the things that I think about a lot, I've had some challenges in my life with my family and a lot of health issues, with cancer a few times, and to me, resilience is really, really important. And as as you know, I was in higher ed for 27 years and was a professor as well at the University of Toledo, and this younger generation of college kids have had their parents maybe more involved than you and I when we grew up in everyday life. Not that our parents weren't involved.
Sure.
But I worry about them in the sense that particularly those young people that come from means and haven't experienced a lot of negative things in their life. And life is full of negative things. I mean, you're an example of how in a millisecond life can change. Yeah. And I worry that young people today don't have the resilience that will help them 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. And what are your thoughts if you're talking to someone like that about resilience, and how can we make sure we have it?
I think the way that how I have it, if you will. I don't think it was, I was born with it by any means. I think that I got really lucky, and I had parents that wanted to get me involved in sports early on. As I mentioned, it was karate at first, then golf, and then football and so forth, track. But the coaches, the teachers, the coaches, if you will, had an enormous influence on my life in terms of putting me in situations, sporting wise, that was challenging. There's times you wanted to quit, and they were there to lead you on, to persevere, to be resilient, because they were also saying, look, at the end of the day, you're shooting for this, but it's not a straight line. Life is not a straight line. You're going to make mistakes and you're going to fail, but those mistakes become learning opportunities. And when you fail, one thing I learned is to fail even faster, which can inspire you to search for a better way, a better approach, a better solution. And striving to be better, being resilient in the process of doing it, can carry you through, some pretty difficult times. But I got to say, it was definitely the coaches in my life, my dad, and what he instilled upon me. And I think in today's world, I think a lot of kids, a lot of things are given to them. They haven't experienced adversity. Everyone's getting a trophy these days, if you even come in last place. So I think in some ways, in my opinion, I don't know if that's the best move, because how do you learn through that experience when you fail on your own and no one's there to give you a trophy when you actually go down? And if that was to happen, you don't know how someone's going to respond to any situation. But if that ever happened, not having the tools to get you back out of it, is how do you pick up a book? How do you Google and search someone who's gone through some really tough times and learn what they went through and embrace it and try to apply that in your own life? If that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I think back when I was in college, went to Central Michigan, Chippewas. My mom was my resilience coach, if you will.
Yeah.
And I spoke to her on the phone maybe once a week, just once a week. And and during that time, as a college kid with girlfriends and all sorts of things, there's a lot of ups and downs. And I didn't have a cell phone to talk to my mom, every time something went wrong.
Sure.
And so I think even though it might have been painful at the time, it helped me gain some resilience of making sure I was doing the best I could to fail forward, if you will. And so I think that's really important message.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure is.
And you mentioned your book.
Yeah.
So I know you said that you had a vision in your mind for 7 or 9 years before you became a world-class speaker. Did you also then at some point say, I need to write a book?
Yes.
How did that happen?
So I guess long story short is I was speaking for about 6 or 7 years, and people were saying, look, you're only giving us an hour on stage, compelling and so forth, inspirational, but that's all you're giving us. We want to hear more about your story. So at that point is when I began writing and journaling and putting pieces together. And I eventually brought in 2 ghostwriters to help me put the book together, because that's not my forte. And which is kind of great, which is kind of neat, was is when I got in the speaking industry, how vision, mindset, grit really came to be. I talk about it a bit, but I hired a coach who really tried to formulate what I've been through to come up with a tagline that really represents what I do. And, vision, mindset, grit is what she thought would be a really perfect fit. And then I decided to title my book the same thing: Vision, Mindset, Grit. Subtitle: How to Stand Up When Life Paralyzes You. Wow. And it's a great book. We've got some pictures in it and so forth. And just to try to bring those concepts to life. And so you can see progress going through. So you don't have to just wonder what it would be. That's why the pictures we felt were important.
Yeah. So what, now the pandemic's over.
Yep.
And you're back. What do you foresee in the future for Scott Burrows?
I still want to. I'm 58 years old. I'm getting a little older. Am I living in a very?
You look great.
Well, thank you. But thank you for that. I still would love to continue speaking for another 5 to 8 years, and then try to reassess in terms of where I'm at physically, traveling a lot and being able to walk. See, as an example, I flew in last night from Phoenix. I was gone for 2 days, spent a lot of time in my wheelchair, and I try to spend as much time out of it that I can so I don't atrophy, which I do quickly. So I'll just have to reassess my body and things of that nature. But I also do virtual presentations, which is great, with your buddy there, Rick, who you're working with. And so that's an avenue to still get the message out. But that's one. And I think secondly, I think that maybe perhaps doing a second book. Don't know what yet. Maybe about my travels, my journey, bringing in how I have impacted others through testimonials that have come to me over the years. Anyway, so I think those two things for the most part. And then also try to still enjoy life as much as you can, because life is really short. I'm still very active. I enjoy boating and scuba diving and snow skiing and working out and pushing my wheelchair miles to stay in shape and eating
and you
well.
golf too, correct?
I do. Hear a great story. I literally 2 weeks ago, I was at McCarthy's Pub in Jupiter, here, Tequesta, and Florida, and I met Tom, who's the president of Turtle Creek Country Club. So I went up to Tom. I go, listen, I was introduced to you. I go, I became a member this summer. However, I had an electric bike accident. I can actually ride an electric bike. I don't pedal. It's more like a scooter. But I sprained my right knee and my ankle. And I said I couldn't really play. And I reached out, and I haven't heard back. If you could just forward my dues to the following year. He's like, oh my God, you didn't? He goes, we forwarded. We're going to apply to next year. I go, well, thank you. And he goes, I heard about your story. I go, but what you don't know is this. My dad was a golf course superintendent at Turtle Creek for 17 years. I grew up working on that course, even going through college, and I was on my dad's group health insurance policy. And Turtle Creek, basically, their health insurance, for the most part, saved my life, because it got me to Craig Hospital in Denver, which was the only rehab hospital back in 1983. If you didn't go there, you're going to a nursing home to die a slow death. So I said, that's one. Secondly, I said to him that Turtle Creek, the members did a fundraising and raised $5,000 to help Dad offset expenses. And if you take $5,000 times 5% times 39 years, that's a pretty big number. So I told that to Tom, thanked him with all my heart. And one other note I'll make, and this is my anniversary and stuff, but last week, the lady who runs the Turtle Creek summer program, the membership, she called me. She goes, hey, by the way, I dropped the ball. Supposed to call you. Yes, we're waiving it. She goes, by the way, I happened to open the minutes up of our board of directors book, and I turned to the page, ironically enough, from 39 years ago, where your dad was being hired, and that was his salary and so forth. What are the odds?
Wow. Yeah, it gives me the chills. And so, well, you and I have to play golf sometime.
Fair enough.
I'll take your good. Yeah, not very good, but I enjoy playing, and living in Stewart, you can play all year long. All right, Scott, we've talked about your journey, and I'm wondering, in that journey, did you find love? And I know you have a family, so I know people want to hear that story.
It's a yes, and it is an interesting story, and this is it. I was reluctant to go to my 30th high school reunion. I just didn't want to go to it being single and knowing that a lot of my friends there were married with kids and so forth. And I didn't have any of that. And but some good friends of mine said, come on, come with us. So I did. And it turns out I had an amazing conversation with a classmate. Her name is Kim. And we had an amazing conversation that went on. And I found her really cute and attractive. And right after our reunion, we went on 7 straight dates. Boom, 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 boom. And I did fall in love. The conversations continued. She's become the love of my life. And 3 years ago, right before a global pandemic, we got married in Maui, Hawaii. And I became a stepdad to her 3 beautiful children, Alexandra, Samantha, and Gregory, who I now refer to as my steppies. And I suppose the moral of that story is this: if you happen to be single, go to your high school reunion.
Not me, because I went to an all-boys Catholic school. So,
You want to hear something funny about that? There was one time, because I share this on the platform, and people laugh, and there were two guys in the front row going back and forth, shaking their head. I'm like, come on, honestly, why would you not go to your high school reunion? They're like, because we both went to an all-boys school. I'm like, okay, fair enough.
yeah, yes. But I do go to my reunions when the school closed a long time ago,
Yeah.
but we still have reunions for the fellas. So that's great, and I look forward to someday meeting Kim as well. So thank you
Fair enough.
for sharing that personal story.
Can I share one thing that I think might be
Yes,
of value?
please.
I was a passenger in the car, and the guy driving, his name is Ed. He was a fraternity brother. He also played football at Florida State. One of the most difficult things for me being in this catastrophic accident, as you might imagine, was tough enough, but the toughest thing for me to deal with was Ed. He never once came to visit me in the hospital, and he never called. And one of the first times that I saw him was almost 2 years later. I was on my way to a football game, walking gingerly with those foam crutches and braces on my legs. I saw Ed about 20 yards away. We both looked, we made eye contact, we nodded. And then he turned around and he walked in that direction, if you will, with his friends. And in that moment, I felt anger running through my veins at a level I've never experienced anger before. And that night, I found myself drinking way in excess, hoping to forget. Now, one of my best friends to this day is Brendan McCarthy. He was with me. He was not drinking because he knew I was having a really tough time at it. He drove me home that night. And when he pulled me out of the car, put me over his shoulders to put me to bed, I said, look, if I can't get through this, let my mom know one thing. Just let her know that I love her. I was going there. And the next morning I woke up and I recalled what I said. And I usually talk to audiences, even my book, has anything ever happened to you in your own lives, professionally as well, that you feel has been unfair or unjust? And most people cannot. I said, this is when I made a decision to let it happen, to let the anger, in a sense, move through me as opposed to defining me for the rest of my life. Now, I never saw Ed again, but about a decade, no, not physically, but about a decade ago, I went looking for him on Facebook and I found him. Ultra successful in his business, lives in Dallas, Texas, in the same neighborhood as the Bushes. I friended him on Facebook, and I would say about 3 months later, he finally accepted the friendship along with a text message, and the message said this. It said, Scott, it's so good to hear from you, but the truth is there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened on St. George's Island where the accident was, which is in the panhandle of Florida. He goes, all I wish I could do is go back and change what happened, but because I cannot, I've been riddled in remorse and guilt. And when I heard those words, I heard a voice in the back of my mind, eases pain, right? The same voice that Kevin Costner heard in The Field of Dreams. And when I texted him back, I said, Ed, if I could go back and change what happened to me on November 3rd, 1984, 39 years ago today, I'm not quite sure that I would, based on how I responded to adversity in terms of what I'm doing today, giving back to humanity at the highest level through corporate speaking in my book. But then something occurred to me. I thought Ed was hoping that I would forgive him for never, ever being there. And I want you and your listeners to know that I did indeed forgive Ed for never being there. And in doing so, it not only freed him in many ways, it freed me. So the power to forgive someone in your own life is a choice, and the power of choice can be life-changing.
Absolutely. That's a great message. And Scott, I want to thank you so much for all you're doing. And most of all, thank you for being on Discovering the Power of You.
Pleasure to be here.
This is a wonderful message for our listeners, our viewers. We're going to make sure we post your website and also remind people the name of the book and how to get that. So
Sure.
I know people listening and watching will want to see and hear more about what you're doing. So thank you. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.
Fair enough.
Thanks to Rick, and maybe playing some golf, or, I've lived in Florida now 3 years, Scott. I've yet to be on somebody's boat. So maybe
we can make that happen if you like.
All right.
We can make it happen. It's down my
All right.
way in Jupiter. I'll make that happen.
Well, I love Jupiter. So, and I also
Tiger Woods' house on the Intercoastal.
Yeah, and I love to get back to McCarthy's too. I tried going there on St. Patrick's Day, and that was kind of a mistake.
We were there. It was crowded. It was crowded. But we'll do that sometime.
Yeah, we'll do it. So thank you. God bless
You're
you. And this
You as well.
anniversary of 39 years.
Yeah.
Wow. All I can say is you're an amazing human being. So thank you.
Thank you, and God bless.
Yep.